Good morning, my lovelies, and welcome back to my channel. Surprise! It's probably the first time I'm doing an intro like this, but I figured it is about time. And what better time to do an intro like this than when I have a brand new top hat on my head. I've been sewing strike-offs for Oh So Pretty this week, and of course I made a dress because this is bamboo. And I had a little bit of a scraps left, so I said, what would work well with an Alice-inspired print than a top hat? So I started thinking how hard can it be to make a top hat? And I came with a prototype, came up with a small prototype for a little top hat. So I figured I may not be the only one interested in accessories like this. So I ended up drafting a pattern, sharing it with my friends who loved it. So I'm gonna go ahead and share it with all of you. And thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting my channel. Thank you for over 2,000 of you who have subscribed. I appreciate it, and I promise to keep coming up with fun new free ideas. And I'm going to start uploading videos of sew with me, not just for bags but also for dresses and stuff that I do all the time. So that's my goal for 2021. But for now, I have for you this free cute project for, let's say, dapper days at Disney World, or just a cute fun accessory if you want to go wild on a day. Without further ado, let's get started. Let's start with where to get the pattern pieces. They are available in a Dropbox link that I have posted in the description of the video. It's free. Feel free to download it. I do ask you kindly, if anybody wants to sew one, to refer them to my YouTube channel, just because it helps my viewings. But it's just a favor that I'm asking of you. Please do not share the pattern, just send them here. I included a PDF file with the pattern, and I also included two SVG files. One SVG is for cutting the hard interfacing, like the Peltex or the Decoville Heavy, and another SVG file is for cutting the fabric and the interface fabric, or the woven interfacing and the fabric itself, because they're two different measurements. So you should have 3 pieces once you've printed the pattern and you've cut them. You have your outside woven, this is backstitch woven, interfaced with woven interfacing, and then Decoville Heavy or Peltex. And when you add the this one is cut with my Cricut, you can see that the Cricut cuts a lot better than my hands. When you adhere the brim Decoville Heavy or the brim Peltex, you will be adhering, matching the edges on the outside, and then in the inside you will have a 1/4 of an inch that does not have Peltex. That is for having a neater seam allowance. The seam allowance for this pattern is a 1/4 of an inch throughout, and I drafted it so it's not, look, it's like the one I have on my head. I drafted it so it finishes with bias tape on the sides, and inside it's left raw because it stays on the head, it won't see it. I'm gonna sew a second option where I line the inside, although it's definitely unnecessary if you ask me, because this is like a bow, it's just gonna stay on your head. But the pattern pieces will say cut 1 because it's meant to be like this, raw on the inside, unfinished. You can finish it with bias tape if you want, but I honestly don't see why you would bother. So that's why it says cut 1. If you want to line it, you will cut 2 of the fabric and woven interfacing, or just 2 of the fabric if you don't want to have a stiffer lining. And again, I finished this with bias tape. I'm going to show you 2 methods of finishing with bias tape because I do not like using hot glue. Like, hot glue and I are not friends, like not at all. I always get burned, so I avoid hot glue like the plague. If you don't want to do bias tape on the edge, you can definitely hot glue trim or hot glue your something to finish it nicely on the edge. And then everything that you put on it, it's on you. All the accessories and the stuff you want to glue on it, it's up to you. You can leave it plain, or you can start adding some tulle, maybe a brooch, some pearls, or whatever strikes your fancy to make it your own. You can use this, let's say, for example, you can add like those little clocks or watches, like the wheels from the watch. I'm sure there's a proper term for that, but I can't think of it. To make it like a steampunk style, if you make it all black, let's say, you can go wild with this. It's a pretty basic and easy pattern. Again, only 3 pieces once you're interfaced, or 6 if you want to line it. But for the first one that I want to show you, I'm using, oh, and you can put this when you're done on anything you want. I like these 1/4 inch headbands from Walmart or CVS. From that, I think I got them from CVS from that $1 bin. They were like 3 for $1, or maybe the Dollar Tree. I know they were 3 for $1 at one point. So they're a 1/4 inch wide, and I just super glued it. Because again, hot glue and I, no friends. I super glued it on and just wear it for my pictures. And maybe at the park for dapper days. You can also hot glue it on like a beret, or you can put a 1/4 inch elastic or thinner in a loop, and then just glue the elastic in 2 spots and then put it on and cover it with your hair. So this way the band will not be visible if it's like a thin elastic. So without further ado, let's get started on the construction. Again, I'm following a 1/4 inch seam allowance with this pattern. And for the bias tape, you need minimum of 22.5 strip, like a scrap of bias tape. We'll start by adding the top to the crown. But first, let's create the crown. You'll see that I left a 1/4 inch without Peltex or Decovil Heavy on both sides, and a 1/4 inch on both the top and the bottom. So you'll fold them right sides together, and you'll be stitching with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can definitely do this on your regular sewing machine. One of my dear friends, and dare I call her a tester for this pattern? It sounds so presumptuous of me to say that. She sewed one last night on her sewing machine, so it can definitely be done. I just like my industrial. Open your seam allowance, and there you have it. The crown of the hat is all done. If you have a directional print, make sure that you do add, see, mine has these little buckets inside, so this will be the top. It is directional. So I'm going to add, again, if your top is directional, I would recommend to put what's like the top of the design towards the back seam allowance. So now I'm simply adding this top, and I'll be stitching it down with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Because the Peltex is smaller than the fabric, this will help hold it in place. Because the Peltex will fold inside, see, like this. And again, do the best you can. You've seen my prototype. It's like the stitches are not straight, and it's a fun project. And trust me, I promise you, I will not come and check your stitches ever. You know, I have friends from this sewing world of ours who I've met in real life after being friends online, and not just one but more than one told me when we first met, oh, please don't check the hem of my dress or the hem of my skirt. Never, ever, ever. I would never, ever, ever do that. Never in a million years I would do that. Like, you know my view on this. I don't expect or strive for perfection in my sewing. I strive to create stuff that I love, that I wear proudly, that I enjoy. That is my only desire in this. Okay, so you're gonna pin this all in place, and now you're gonna have to figure out which way you are more comfortable sewing. You can sew it on the flat like this all around, but I don't know how comfortable you'll be with your foot inside, with the foot so close to the peltex. Or you can try to sew it on the inside, which is oh, I might try both. It depends on your machine and how comfortable you are with each position. So try your best to stitch it at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and if you scrunch the peltex like I am right now, you can iron it afterwards. This pattern has basically 3 stitches. 2 stitches in a circle that I'm doing right now, and 1 stitch straight, which is the creating the crown. But and that's it. Then your bias tape, if you sew it, or gluing any kind of trim you want. And again, it's not gonna look perfect on the inside. It might look perfect if you glue it, but I am not one to work with the glue. Do the best you can. You might find it better to do 1 round of stitching and see if you want to redo it on top of it, because now you have the extra help of the brim already being stitched. It's a pretty small project, so for people who don't like small projects, this may not be for you. I am not a fan of super small projects, like you won't see me doing doll clothes. However, I am a fan of this little top hat because I like the finished product a lot. Again, you might find it easier to use staples if you want, but the seam allowance is too small, I find, to be able to use staples properly. Everything should be fitting on 1-to-1 ratio, but if you have like a little bubble, that means I didn't sew it perfectly. So it's okay, I can just unstitch it a little bit and spread out the stitching better. Again, do your best. That's all you can ask for. perfect. So the top is done. What you have to do right now is flip the top. Again, if you want to be extra, you can finish this with like a small bias tape, but I would not put myself through that. So now that the top is done, you want to flip it right side out. Oops, with any long threads inside. Any creases or wrinkles will be ironed out at the end, so don't be worried about that. So this is your crown with the top. Beautiful. So now you want to add your brim. Again, if you're using a directional print, check if there's anything you want featured in the front. Like I want Woogie Boogie in the front, so I want mine to be like this. If you're not using a directional print, then you're good to go anyway. So now you want to again attach the brim just like you did before in a circle. Again, this should be a 1-to-1 ratio. However, you are adding a circle, a concave curve to a convex curve, so you might need to wiggle it a little bit because it's not two straight lines, but the ratio is indeed 1-to-1. And again, the more clips you use, the better it will hold, because the Peltex tends to want to open the hat. And I'm trying to catch the Peltex in my clips as well, just to hold it down. I've included a 1-inch square in the pattern, so double check that. And if you find that your crown is not big enough, it just feels like it's not big enough, you might want to consider adding a few snips, because again, the brim is a straight stitch cut. The brim is a circle, whereas the crown, it's made from a rectangle. So you're doing a circle in a rectangle. So doing a few little snips will help open it up a little bit. And then we're stitching again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, as best as you can. Definitely go slow. It's one of those projects that doesn't have a lot of stitches, but time-wise might take you longer than one with more stitches, because I highly encourage you to go slow on this. just because it's a small project and because of the nature of the curves. And I guess I ended up just throwing the pins out. And like I said before, you might find it easier to do just a random crazy stitch as best as you can. It's gonna be like crooked probably, but then go ahead and do one more good stitch, another round of stitching that will be straighter, because now you don't it's basically basted on, so you don't have any more pins in your way, and it's all in place. Beautiful. So I'll show you what I mean. Okay. This is the hat, and you can see it's looking pretty rough. So I'm gonna now go ahead and do one more round of stitching, and this time I will get it a lot straighter, because now something is holding it in place. And you can get that seam allowance more constant now. It is definitely not something you need on a daily basis, but if you want to get ready for like fun days at the park or Halloween, anywhere you can fathom wearing a top hat, this would be a cute project for that. We're done. See how easy that was? So, what you have to do now is go ahead and give your brim a good steam press. Then you want to give your crown a good press, and for that I encourage you to put your hand inside and iron like so. However, don't put just your bare hand. Use pot holder. My friend Christina came up with this idea after I told her how I burned my hand just putting my hand inside. If you don't have any of those fancy ironing stuff, because there's plenty of stuff for the accessories for your ironing board that would make ironing the crown easy, but I don't have any of that. So if you're like me and you don't have any of the fancy stuff, all you have to do is put like your hand in with a pot holder so it protects you from the warmth, and just iron it on the side like so, and it will be straight. And to iron the brim, you just put it flat on your ironing board and just iron around. Let me finish it up with the bias tape so I show you how it is. Find what is the back of your hat, which is this part. This is store-bought double fold bias tape. So I'm going to fold one end to the inside, and then I'm going to stitch it all around in that first ditch of in that first fold of the pre-made bias tape, and I'm going to slightly stretch it around the brim, matching the raw edges. You need bias tape or something cut on bias because of the circle nature of the brim. You need it to like mold beautifully on a circle. And the bias tape has a slight stretch to it, as opposed to a straight cut, like cross grain or along the grain of the fabric. I'm seeing that I went a little off there, so I'm gonna have to go back and do a few more stitches just to make sure that I keep a constant seam allowance. So this was a 22.5 piece of binding, which was plenty. Okay, so now when we get to the beginning, I'll leave about less than an inch overlap, and I'm just overlapping on the front, on the where we started, like right here where we started. I'm just overlapping. Okay, so here I was saying that I noticed when I was sewing that while this is in the ditch, here I went a little bit off the ditch. So I'm gonna fix that right now. In the ditch, in the fold of the bias tape. Easy fix. So now your bias tape will just simply fold over. And again, this is rough because I haven't ironed it yet. But once you press it, it's gonna look much neater. Look, it does, right? And obviously I didn't glue my pearls on it because, again, I told you, hot glue and I not friends. So this is how it looks like on the outside. This is how it looks like on the inside. And where those two meet, there is no raw edge right now. So now you want to stitch in the ditch on the top, and that will catch the back of the bias tape if you stitch in the ditch, because the back is a little longer. And when I say stitch in the ditch, I say attempt to stitch in the ditch as best as you can. Because I'm not the best at this. But then again, I'm using this Wizardry unicorn main thread, which blends in with my beautiful fabric very well. So give it a good press. Accessorize the top hat however you want. I have some examples here in my little bag of stuff. You can put like a flower, you can put pom-poms, or I can put a flower and a pom-pom. Well, in this case I would like a popcorn. Or you can put some cute streams. Here, on here. Whatever you want, you can go wild. This is your some cute trips, whatever you want. Exactly. I'm giving you the basics, and then you can personalize it and make it your own. So this is my little top hat. I'm gonna give it a good press, and then I'm gonna glue it to another headband probably, and see what I'm inspired to add to it. Maybe a little bow, I don't know. The next one, cut. Let's sew another one. This time I'm going to try to make a lined one, and I'll show you a different way to attach the bias at the brim. So for this I cut with my Cricut using the SVG files that I included with the pattern. I cut Decovil Heavy this time. It's the first time I'm using it, so I'm wondering how it will perform. So far I've only used Peltex, but I love my Decovil Heavy for bags, way better than Peltex. So for all my testers, because I went through so much of them, I prefer to use Decovil, prefer to use Peltex, just so I'm not wasteful. But this time I'm going to try one with Decovil Heavy. So I have my main interfaced, just like I did before, and then I cut the lining out of waterproof canvas. So it might be a little thick, but we'll see. I'm playing it by ear. And then I cut a strip of about 22 inches long on the bias, so it has a little stretch of just solid quilting cotton cut on the bias, and this is cut at 2¼ inch and folded long sides together, just like so. So this is what I'm going to use for my binding. That's it. Let's get started. We'll do the exact same steps as we did before. So I might just speed this up a little bit since I've already done it. So I'll put together the top with the crown and then the brim to the crown for both the main and the lining, and I'll see you back here in a few so we can put it all together, and I'll show you a new way to attach bias binding. So we have the brim attached to the crown and the top for both the lining and the main. I'm going to take the lining and put it again wrong side out. take my main and just slide that in. So now you're going to pin all around the raw edges. Whether I think it's worth the effort or not, honestly, I don't think it's worth the effort to make a lining for it, but for anyone who wants to line it, just remember to cut 2 of the cotton woven and optionally woven interfacing. You don't need another one of the Decoville for sure. And you can just stitch 2 of them and then slide wrong sides together your 2 little hats. So now that I have this pinned, I'm gonna go ahead and baste it all around just so it holds in place and I don't have to worry about all these clips. So just a simple basting stitch all around. I wanted to show you this just in case you want it to be clean on the inside. But again, this is like a bow. It's like something to attach to a beret or a headband. It's not an actual hat that you need to wear, so I really don't think the lining is necessary. Another thing you could do that my friend Christina did yesterday, instead of adding the crown and the top, she just basted lining in the just for the brim. She cut a lining piece just for the brim from the same fabric as her main, and then just left everything raw. It's up to you. As far as I'm concerned, it can all stay raw because it will be attached to a headband. Okay, so now your little top hat is lined as well. And of course I'll give it a good press so it stays nice and neat. But let me show you a different method to add bias tape where you don't have to fold and burn your fingers when you fold like 4 times like this. When you make your own bias tape, that's basically what you do. You fold once in the center and then you fold again towards the center. And then you burn your fingers, right? If you don't use pre-made ones. So, with this method that I've learned from Sarah from So Sweet and from her parents, you take your 2 1/4 inch strip of bias woven, so it's cut on the bias, and you fold it wrong sides together and press. Only one press, that's it. So now, starting from the back of the hat, so from here, I'm simply going to stitch this matching the raw edge. I'll fold inside like this so I don't have any raw edge showing, and then I'll simply stitch around the brim, pulling the fabric taut a little bit, just a little bit, just so it curves nicely afterwards. So I'm stitching this with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Again, as you can see here, I'm matching the raw edges. It might be helpful to give the brim a press before you add the bias tape or the bias binding. Okay, so now I made it back to the end. So I'm gonna overlap a little over 1/2 inch and back stitch. And then I'm going to remove this excess. Okay, so now you have your brim with the raw edges together of 2 layers of your bias tape, well, bias binding, and your brim. So now all you have to do is flip over your top hat. You might, if you went over the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, you might need to trim your brim a little bit if you went over the seam allowance in spots, in various spots. And I'm gonna do just that, because I can see if, even if you went just a smidge over, you can tell when you flip it. I'm trimming it just a little bit. I know I'm basically defeating the purpose of cutting it nicely with the Cricut, but I'll try to trim it nicely. I'll try. And that's because I went a little over the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. If you went a little under, then you won't have this issue. So go a little under the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Okay? So now when I flip it, and it looks rough when it's not pressed. So when I flip it, it automatically flips under, and it's gonna yield you a slimmer bias binding than the store-bought double fold. So now you can stitch in the ditch, or you can use a zigzag stitch. You can use a decorative stitch now if you want. How cool would that be to use like a decorative stitch right here on the edge where you attach it? To use is either a zigzag stitch or a deco stitch. That would be really nice. To me, this method is absolutely genius when you don't have to burn your hands. Not my idea. I definitely learned this from Sew Sweetness. And now you have a few layers to sew through, so be careful, especially if you've lined this. So let's stitch it down. I don't think I'm going to stitch in the ditch. I'm stitching on it because not the prettiest binding I've done, but hey, passable. And passable is what I aim for sometimes. And this will be, again, this will be stitched, not stitched, glued to something, because it's, unless you put it on your bun, it's not gonna stay by itself. So it needs to be glued to a headband or a clip or something. It's pretty on the inside, but was it worth the effort? Not really. Alright, so this is what it looks like right now. I'll go give it a good press, and then I'm gonna start playing with accessories. And I think I got this from Lisa from Hissy Fit. They're like little silicone charms. Oh, and these have the monorails. How cool would it be to add some like this? They're cute, right? And then we can do maybe a Mickey right here. So I think I'm gonna glue this stuff. This one is already busy in the print. So for this, I don't know yet how I'm gonna accessorize it, but it's your world, your oyster, you live in it, you go wild with accessories. So I'm gonna go finish this off camera and maybe let my kids pick up some, at least my youngest, who is very into crafting. I'll let him see if he has any ideas for decoration. I hope you enjoyed this super quick, easy, fun project. Again, thank you so much for being here all the time, for supporting me, and for subscribing and for liking my videos. Give me a thumbs up if you've enjoyed this. Please turn on the notification bell so you're notified when I upload new videos. And I will talk to you in my next one. Bye.